There is something deeply wrong with the bread on your table. For thousands of years, bread was called the staff of life. It built civilizations, fed armies, sustained families through brutal winters. But today, that same word, bread, describes something that inflames your gut, spikes your blood sugar, and leaves you hungry an hour later. In 1324, in a village outside York, England, the average peasant consumed 2 to 3 pounds of bread every single day. It was 70% of their total calories. These were hard-working men, hauling stones, ploughing fields, building cathedrals that still stand today. And they thrived on it. No diabetes epidemic, no gluten sensitivity crisis, no inflammatory bowel disease affecting 1 in every 100 people. Fast forward to today, 1 in 3 adults is pre-diabetic. Celiac disease has increased by 400% since the 1950s. Millions more suffer from what doctors vaguely call non-celiac gluten sensitivity, bloating, brain fog, joint pain, chronic fatigue. Your grandfather ate bread his whole life without a problem. So what the hell changed? The answer isn't that you're weak or that your gut is defective. The answer is that modern bread is not bread. It's an industrialized food product designed for profit, not nutrition. And the medieval peasant you've been taught to pity, he knew something about wheat that the food industry desperately wants you to forget. Before we go deeper, drop a comment and tell us. Have you ever felt sick after eating bread? Bloating, fatigue, brain fog? What symptoms do you get? Let us know below, because what you're about to discover will change how you see every loaf on the shelf. Section 1. The modern failure. Bread that isn't bread. Pick up a loaf of supermarket bread and read the ingredients. Enriched wheat flour, code for wheat that's been stripped of everything valuable, then injected with synthetic vitamins to meet legal minimums. High fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, mono and diglycerides, calcium propionate, azodicarbonamide, a chemical also used in yoga mats and shoe rubber. This isn't bread, it's a science experiment. Medieval bread had 3 ingredients: flour, water, salt. Sometimes a bit of leaven or yeast, that's it. But modern industrial bread needs 20 to 30 ingredients just to stay soft for 2 weeks on a shelf. And that's just the beginning. The wheat itself is fundamentally different. In 1960, a scientist named Norman Borlaug developed what he called miracle wheat: shorter stalks, higher yields, resistant to disease. He won the Nobel Prize for it. The Green Revolution, they called it. It fed millions, but there was a cost no one talked about. This new wheat, technically called semi-dwarf wheat, was bred for one thing: maximum yield per acre, not nutrition, not digestibility, yield. To achieve that, plant breeders introduced genetic changes that altered the gluten structure, increased the starch content, and ramped up compounds called lectins and phytates that interfere with nutrient absorption. Ancient wheat varieties like einkorn had 14 chromosomes. Emmer wheat had 28. Modern bread wheat has 42. That genetic complexity came with a trade-off. Modern wheat contains gluten proteins that your great-grandfather's gut never encountered. The gliadin fraction, the part responsible for most gluten reactions, is structurally different. Studies from the University of Kansas found that modern wheat triggers significantly higher immune responses than heritage varieties. Your body recognizes it as a foreign invader, and it responds with inflammation, not because you're sensitive, because the wheat has been engineered into something your digestive system doesn't recognize as food. Then there's the milling. Medieval flour was stone ground, a slow process that kept the wheat kernel intact. The bran, the germ, the endosperm, all ground together. That meant fiber, healthy fats, B vitamins, minerals like magnesium and zinc, all still present. Modern roller milling, introduced in the 1870s, strips all of that away. It removes the bran and the germ because they contain oils that go rancid, shortening shelf life. What's left is pure white endosperm, basically pure starch and a damaged protein structure. Then it's bleached with chemicals like chlorine gas or benzoyl peroxide to make it whiter. This is what's sold as enriched flour. Enriched because they have to add back a fraction of the nutrients they destroyed. But here's where it gets worse. Medieval bread was slow. After mixing flour and water, bakers let the dough rest and ferment for 12 to 24 hours, sometimes longer. This wasn't laziness, it was necessity. During that fermentation, natural yeast and bacteria broke down the starches and proteins. They pre-digested the bread for you. The gluten became easier to process. Phytic acid, which binds to minerals and blocks absorption, was neutralized. Lectins, which can damage the gut lining, were reduced. By the time that bread went into the oven, it was fundamentally transformed. Your modern supermarket loaf? Mixed, risen, and baked in under 3 hours. No fermentation, no breakdown of anti-nutrients, no pre-digestion. Just raw, reactive proteins hitting your gut at full strength. The result is a food that looks like bread, smells like bread, but behaves in your body like pure sugar. The glycemic index of white bread is 75, higher than table sugar at 65. That means it spikes your blood glucose faster than a candy bar. Your pancreas dumps insulin to handle the flood. Your blood sugar crashes. You feel hungry again an hour later. Over years, this cycle leads to insulin resistance, the root cause of type 2 diabetes. Medieval bread, with its intact fiber and slow fermentation, had a much lower glycemic response. It released energy slowly. It kept you full. It didn't trigger the hormonal chaos that modern bread does every single time you eat it. Section 2. The investigation. Clues from the medieval field. To understand why medieval wheat was different, we have to go back to the fields. Medieval farmers grew what we now call landrace varieties. These were wheat strains adapted over centuries to local soil, local climate, local conditions. Einkorn, the oldest cultivated wheat, dating back 10,000 years, emmer, used by the Egyptians to build the pyramids. Spelt, favoured in medieval Germany and Switzerland. These weren't uniform. In a single field you'd see variation, some stalks taller, some shorter, some ripening earlier, some later. That diversity was insurance. If disease hit, some plants survived. If drought came, some adapted. It wasn't efficient by modern standards, but it was resilient, and it was digestible. Einkorn, for example, contains 14 chromosomes, the simplest genetic structure of any wheat. Its gluten is weak, which means it doesn't rise as dramatically as modern bread, but that weak gluten is exactly what makes it easier to digest. Studies at the University of Florence found that people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity could eat einkorn bread without symptoms. The gliadin proteins were structured differently, the immune system didn't react, and the nutritional profile was superior. Einkorn has 30% more protein than modern wheat, 4 times more beta-carotene, and significantly higher levels of lutein, an antioxidant that protects your eyes and brain. Then there's how they milled it. Medieval mills were powered by water or wind, turning massive stones that ground the grain slowly. This process generated very little heat, preserving the delicate oils in the wheat germ. Those oils contain vitamin E, omega-3 fatty acids, and phytosterols that support heart health. Modern roller mills operate at high speed and high temperatures. They destroy those oils almost immediately. What's worse, the steel rollers create a fine, almost powdery flour that your body absorbs too quickly, causing blood sugar spikes. Stone-ground flour stays coarser. It takes longer to digest. It provides sustained energy instead of a brief surge followed by a crash. But the real secret was fermentation. Medieval bakers didn't have commercial yeast. They used wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria captured from the air, what we now call sourdough culture. This culture was kept alive for generations, passed from mother to daughter, baker to apprentice. When mixed with flour and water, the bacteria went to work. They consumed the sugars in the dough, producing lactic acid and acetic acid. This acidic environment activated enzymes that broke down phytic acid, the compound that binds to minerals like iron, zinc, and calcium, preventing absorption. It also broke down lectins and enzyme inhibitors that can irritate the gut lining. By the time the bread was baked, it was nutritionally transformed. A medieval peasant eating 2 pounds of this bread a day wasn't just filling his stomach. He was getting complete nutrition, protein from the wheat germ, healthy fats from the oils, B vitamins for energy, minerals made bioavailable through fermentation, fiber to keep his gut healthy, and all of it delivered in a form his body could process without triggering inflammation. That's why they could work 12-hour days in the fields. That's why they didn't collapse from blood sugar crashes. The bread sustained them because it was real food. Section 3. The chemistry. What changed and why? Let's talk about gluten, because this is where the modern wheat disaster really begins. Gluten isn't one thing. It's a family of proteins, mainly glutenins and gliadins. These proteins give dough its elasticity and help bread rise. In ancient wheat like einkorn, the gluten structure is simple and weak. In modern wheat, it's complex and strong. That strength is why modern bread can rise so high and stay soft so long. But it's also why your gut struggles to break it down. Research published in the Journal of Proteome Research found that modern wheat contains unique gliadin proteins not present in ancient varieties. These proteins, particularly a fragment called 33-MER, are highly resistant to digestive enzymes. They pass through your stomach and small intestine largely intact, triggering immune responses in susceptible individuals. Then there's the chemical load. Modern wheat is doused with herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides throughout its growing cycle. But the most disturbing practice is pre-harvest desiccation. A week or two before harvest, farmers spray the wheat fields with glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. This kills the plant and dries it out, making harvest faster and more uniform. The problem? Glyphosate residue ends up in the grain. Studies have found glyphosate in over 70% of non-organic wheat products tested. Glyphosate is now classified as a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization. But it also does something more insidious. It disrupts your gut microbiome. It kills beneficial bacteria that help you digest food and regulate your immune system. Medieval wheat never saw a single chemical. Grown in soil enriched with manure and crop rotation, harvested by hand, stored in dry barns clean. Nutritionally, the difference is staggering. Heritage wheat varieties contain 25 to 30% more protein than modern wheat. They have higher levels of selenium, an essential mineral for thyroid function and immune health. They contain more lutein and zeaxanthin, antioxidants that protect against macular degeneration, and they have significantly more omega-3 fatty acids in the germ. Modern wheat, bred for yield and shelf stability, sacrificed all of this. When you remove the bran and germ, you remove 80% of the nutrients. Then you bleach and chemically treat what's left. What you end up with is nutritionally bankrupt starch that your body treats as an inflammatory toxin. Section 4. The proof. Studies and testimonials. In 2014, researchers in Italy conducted a fascinating experiment. They took a group of people with irritable bowel syndrome, all of whom reported severe symptoms after eating modern bread. They switched them to bread made from ancient einkorn wheat, using traditional stone milling and long fermentation. The results? 80% reported significant improvement in symptoms. Less bloating, less pain, better digestion. The wheat wasn't the problem. The modern processing was. Another study from the University of Florence found that einkorn bread produced lower blood glucose and insulin responses compared to modern bread, even when consumed in identical amounts. And today, there's a quiet resurgence. Small-scale farmers and bakers across Europe and North America are reviving heritage wheat. They're stone milling flour. They're fermenting dough for 24 hours or more. And their customers, many of whom thought they could never eat bread again, are discovering they can, not because gluten was never the problem, but because modern wheat and modern processing created a problem that didn't exist 100 years ago. These bakers aren't selling nostalgia, they're selling bread that your body recognizes as food. Section 5. The Modern Disconnect. Why we abandoned what worked. The shift happened after World War II. Industrialization swept through agriculture. The goal was clear: feed a booming population cheaply and efficiently. Hybrid wheat varieties that produced 3 times the yield became the standard. Chemical fertilizers replaced manure and crop rotation. Pesticides and herbicides eliminated the need for manual weeding. Roller mills processed grain faster and cheaper than stone mills. And commercial yeast replaced slow sourdough fermentation, cutting production time from 24 hours to 2. It worked. Bread became cheaper and more available than ever in human history. But the cost was hidden. The cost was your health. Since 1960, type 2 diabetes rates have increased by 700%. Obesity rates have tripled. Autoimmune diseases like celiac, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis have exploded. The industrial food system will tell you this is because we're sedentary, because we eat too much, because we lack willpower. But the timeline doesn't lie. These diseases began their exponential rise precisely when industrial wheat and industrial bread became the norm. Medieval peasants worked hard physically, yes, but they also ate bread as their staple. And they didn't suffer from metabolic disease or autoimmune epidemics. The difference wasn't activity, it was the food. The food industry optimized bread for shelf life, not for health. For profit margins, not for nutrition. They removed everything that made it valuable and replaced it with chemicals to mimic freshness. They bred wheat for yield, not for compatibility with the human digestive system. And when people started getting sick, the industry blamed the victims. You're gluten intolerant, you're sensitive, you have a disorder. No, you're reacting normally to an abnormal food. Medieval bread didn't need a warning label. It didn't come with a list of side effects. It was food. What's on your shelf today is a product, and your body knows the difference. Section 6. Practical application. How to eat bread again. If you want to eat bread that doesn't make you sick, you have 3 options. First, find bakers who use heritage wheat. Look for einkorn, emmer, or spelt. Make sure it's stone ground and naturally fermented. These bakers are rare, but they exist. Farmers markets, specialty bakeries, even some online sources will ship second. Buy heritage wheat flour and make your own sourdough. Yes, it takes time. You'll need to maintain a starter culture, mix dough the night before, let it ferment 12 to 24 hours, but the result is bread that nourishes instead of harms. And once you develop the routine, it's no harder than any other weekly meal prep. Third, reduce your bread consumption entirely and replace it with whole, unprocessed grains. Medieval peasants ate bread because wheat was cheap and calorie-dense. You have options they didn't. Oats, barley, quinoa, even rice, especially if prepared properly with soaking or fermenting, can provide the same sustenance without the inflammatory load of modern bread. The point isn't to live like a medieval peasant. The point is to recognize that their bread was real food and yours isn't. If you're learning something valuable here, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share this forgotten knowledge with more people who are tired of being told that their bodies are the problem when it's the food that's broken. The medieval peasant with his dark, dense loaf of sourdough wasn't ignorant. He was working with a system perfected over thousands of years, a system that prioritized nutrition, digestibility, and sustainability. We traded that system for convenience and profit. We bred wheat that yields more but nourishes less. We milled it in ways that destroy its vitality. We rushed fermentation to save time. We added chemicals to extend shelf life. And now we wonder why bread, the staff of life for millennia, has become a source of disease. The answer is simple. We stopped making bread. We started manufacturing a product that looks like bread, but behaves in the body like poison. Medieval wheat wasn't a superfood because it had magical properties. It was a superfood because it was left alone, grown in healthy soil, milled with care, fermented with patience, baked with respect for the process. That's the knowledge the food industry doesn't want you to have, Because if you understand that the problem isn't gluten, isn't wheat, but industrial processing, you stop buying their products, you start demanding real food, you take control of your health, and that's exactly what you should do. Medieval bread was food. Your supermarket loaf is a chemical experiment. The choice is yours. The secret was never lost. It was just forgotten. And every time you choose real bread over industrial imitation, you reclaim a piece of that ancient knowledge. Knowledge that kept people healthy when life was hard. Knowledge that still works today. Subscribe, and let's keep digging up what they buried.